Our second webinar in a series of several that aim to connect Hungary's startup ecosystem with the world. We are launching a new program called DEEPSEA Hungary. That's our DEEP Startup Ecosystem Accelerator. We're going to work over the course of 2 years with several ecosystem building organizations in Hungary, helping them to develop, design, and implement cutting-edge ecosystem growth initiatives. And we're very happy to have been invited and supported and co-organized this program together with our partners in Hungary, which is EIT Health in Hungary, the NYU, the Hungarian Innovation Agency, Óbuda Uni Venture Capital, and Óbuda University. And today we have a 1-hour international meetup with the purpose of sharing best practices in ecosystem growth and internationalization. For that, we have today 3 speakers. One of them is my co-founder and CEO at DEEP Ecosystems, who will quickly begin with a quick overview of how DEEP supports ecosystem builders around the world with blueprints and best practices in ecosystem building. Then we will hand over to our 2 international speakers from the Americas, which is first Andy Stoll from the United States and Maia Caro from Chile. I will introduce them later on when I hand over to them. After the presentations, which will be around 10 to 15 minutes, we will hand over first to Imre. I hope he's connected here from Óbuda Uni VC. He's the CEO of Óbuda Uni Venture Capital. For a quick reflection and some learnings from the presentations, and then open up for a Q&A with everyone who's here in the room. If you have any questions, we will also open up the possibility of writing here in the chat, so you can just post your questions, and then we will later on go through them. So I will here quickly open Q&A, so you can also see this. Good. Yeah, having said that, closing before we end, I will also explain a little bit more about the program and how you can be part of it. So outlining the next steps with an ecosystem hack that we will have in Hungary on the 1st of July, and then how to join our 2-year program, which is a select program for around 8 moonshot owners or ecosystem building initiatives, which could be you or organizations or leaders from your communities. So I hope that this is also relevant and interesting for you. With that, I would first like to hand over to Thomas.
Yeah, thank you so much. I hope everyone can hear me well. If not, just scream and I will fix the problem. Good. So from my side, a quick welcome and hi, everyone. I want to speak a bit about why we need ecosystem hubs and why we accelerate the creation of ecosystem hubs. First of all, let's start with an understanding of what an ecosystem hub actually might be. If you look around, you see a lot of startup support programs. Often they're called accelerators or incubators. And from first look, it might seem that these are all the same. These are startup programs that take several months or weeks to take in some startups, support them, and make them investor ready, for example. Now, if you look at it like this, then you come to the conclusion that you do not need many of those. One might be enough, and you can actually cover each country by one accelerator. That is not the case, obviously. There is a saying like an African proverb that says it takes a village to raise a child. And if you take this to startups, it takes a village to raise a startup is also true. These startup programs that on the first look all look the same are actually quite diversified. And they focus on specific challenges and problems that startup founders might have directly or indirectly. Often they reduce systemic barriers that hinder startup founders to become successful. And that is a very important part of the equation of startup success. So when you look at programs, for example, like Startup Chile, or like the Unternehmertum in Munich, or the CDTM in Munich, the Center for Digital Technology Management in Munich. If you look closer to them, you realize that they, like startups, focus on certain problems. And for ecosystem builders, that's really an important understanding, first of all. Like startups, you should not focus on the solution, but you should focus on the problem. What is broken in the system and needs fixing? If ecosystem hubs identify the problem that startups have on a system level, they can scale to a massive size. We do see ecosystem hubs of the size of 100, 200, 400 people with budgets of multi-million euros per year. If you look at Station F in Paris with 250 million euro budget over many years, you have Unternehmertum in Munich that I often quote that has, I think, over 20 million budget per year. These kind of hubs, they exist because they identify a challenge, a problem in the market that they fix, and that is worthwhile a lot of investment from the private and the public side. That is why these hubs strive, grow, and have this kind of budget. Let me quickly look at one or two of them. What is the problem that they identified, and why are they so important in the startup scene? Startup Chile is one of our origin stories, let's say. We were co-founded by the CEO of Startup Chile, and we studied this case very intensively. Startup Chile became one of the largest startup programs worldwide. And when you look at it now, you might think it's just an accelerator like many others that takes in startups, gives them funding, and supports them. Yet, if it was just that, it would have not become very successful. The problem they identified was one of culture. Chile did not have a culture of entrepreneurship. When you ask a graduate or a young professional in Chile some 20 years ago what they would want to achieve in their life, they would say, work for a mining company or the government to have a safe, well-paying job. Chile was not in a bad economic shape necessarily. It was doing okay. They had industries, they produced a good turnover and paid their workers well. So people wanted to be part of the copper mining and the government realm. Now came these entrepreneurs that said it would be better for the economy if it would take some risk and would start to grow. They identified that they need to bring a culture of entrepreneurship to the country. But how to do that? They invented the Startup Chile program. The Startup Chile program was designed to invite international entrepreneurs from the US mainly, from top universities with a growth mindset that would spend some months in Chile working on their startup, not necessarily with the goal to relocate there, but rather to inspire the young professionals and students in Chile to become entrepreneurs themselves. And the whole program was designed around attractiveness towards international founders and towards transferring that knowledge and inspiring young entrepreneurs in Chile. For that, they required these entrepreneurs that came to Chile through the program to teach at university about entrepreneurship. Since this was a real problem, this was a real challenge, it caught on very quickly and found a lot of supporters. Now, by optimizing for solving this challenge, it became successful and it scaled. Now it has like a huge budget and is a huge initiative funded by government and private sources. These examples also exist in other places. For example, the CDTM, Center for Digital Technology Management in Munich, is the secret behind the many unicorns that the city of Munich has created. It is an elite study program that invites students from the top universities in Munich to partake in an additional master's program. It's an additional master's program that they do next to their engineering or social science studies. This doesn't sound like it's a startup program at all. Actually, they don't even teach creating a startup necessarily in that master's. Yet, it created a lot of companies out of this. Now, the CDTM has I think created over 400 companies by accident and has created 9 unicorns. This means that CDTM also has found a challenge, which is the corporate landscape in Munich looking for entrepreneurs to fix their problems. The CDTM offers corporates a space where they can bring their most challenging innovation problems and have students work on it in 6 months dedicated master's program. Now, this has resolved a lot of these challenges by creating new companies. It's almost by accident because it's not designed that they create a startup out of this. But since the startups are exposed to the real world market challenges that corporates have, they come up with the idea to create a company. And since in the alumni club, you have a lot of entrepreneurs, you also get the support you need for creating a company. Again, this program has been tremendously successful, and this is because it focused on a real world challenge in the innovation value chain. Now, what we do at DEEP is we try to understand these challenges and bring them into blueprints to inspire emerging ecosystem builders to take up these challenges and replicate and adapt it to their situation so that also in their region, they can create something exciting like the 2 examples I just shared. Now, I think, Harald, you want to show how that looks like in detail by going through our platform for a second.
Sure. Thanks, Thomas. Yes, so as Thomas said, we are a global community of innovation ecosystem hubs, and the idea is that one can learn from the others, and best practices get deployed by local leaders. Some of these were mentioned already by Thomas, and this is also important to know. We teach and help to implement these blueprints to our community members and to our participants in our accelerator programs. Ecosystem acceleration, that's the keyword. And that's also why we're here, because we are launching now with Hungary the next program and help around 8 to 10 ecosystem building projects in Hungary to deploy best practices. This is our accelerator program. The call for applications will start very soon. And the logic behind it is that you as a local leader have the vision, you have what it takes to inspire people. You have a big vision of how to lead and grow your ecosystem, where you want to be. Just like in Chile, for example, somebody had the vision of making Chile a more innovative country with a different innovation culture. That's what you have to bring in. And that we as a community, we as a partner, as an international growth partner, help you to develop that vision, to translate it into key activities that your hub will deliver and will provide to the ecosystem and to key stakeholders. And also, and that's the, let's say, the final version of the hub, have the buy-in from partners that say, yes, we need these activities. Yes, we need these blueprints. Yes, we need this type of impact in our ecosystem. And we're willing to carry you forward into the future to do that. Now, on our platform, we have blueprints that ecosystem builders can quickly adapt and deploy locally. They can use that, for example, inside their activities that are funded already, or they can use it for fundraising, for example, with funding proposals to local governments or international organizations, or also to corporate partners, to institutional partners to say, hey, we really need an innovation sandbox here. Let's build this. And instead of starting with an empty page and Googling or ChatGPTing, what does it take to build an innovation sandbox? You could just use our community assets, work with our mentors, work with our blueprints, and help get the help that you need to deploy this quickly. Have like a roadmap, a checklist where you can say, this is how we built this and how we can deploy this. And so this is how it looks like from the user side for our future DeepSea participants from Hungary. For our current members worldwide, we have a central platform where you can quickly browse through best practices, hear from experienced practitioners in masterclasses in our DEEP Academy, learn about ecosystem building, and find here a growing portfolio of blueprints for ecosystem building that will quickly, let's say, explain you how to do it. And through our community, get the support that you need to deploy them. I will now, due to time, not go through the website, but if you just go to deepecosystems.com, you will find the login if you are a member. And by the way, if you're not a member yet, there's also a free trial. So if you quickly sign up, you can also browse some of the content that is shown here. With that, let's say the best practices that we have shown is like the portfolio library that we have through DEEP Ecosystems. We mentioned some through Thomas. Our community is full of these experiences, and I would now like to highlight to our next two speakers. Hand over first to Andy Stoll. Andy, are you connected? I see you here in the list of participants.
Yep. Here, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Great, I can hear you. Can I get some? Can I have sharing permission? Is that possible?
Yeah, you should be able to share.
I am not. It says I am not, but maybe I'll just present without the slides then if that isn't able to share. It just says
sorry
not
about that.
only meeting organizers and presenters can share, but that's okay.
Okay, let me just
wait, hold
quickly
on.
introduce you.
Now you
just,
should be allowed to.
Perfect.
Yeah, so I would like to thank you very much, Andy, for connecting here. We just met 2 weeks ago in the United States at a conference from the Global Entrepreneurship Network. So it was also great to see you in person recently. And there was also some changes, right? You have a long trajectory of ecosystem building in various institutions. You used to work with Kaufman Foundation, which was and is a major player in the United States, supporting grassroots ecosystem builders. And you have now pivoted towards your own initiative with the eShip Alliance, formerly Ecosystem Building Leadership Network, and it was just launched 2 weeks ago. I was very happy to be there at launch day. And we would like to ask you a little bit about your insights from ecosystem building, what Hungarian ecosystem builders can maybe learn from experience in the United States. And I would like to hand over now to you. So thanks, Andy. And
Perfect.
The floor is
Okay.
yours.
And everyone can see my slides and you can hear me. I think I got that figured out. Thanks for the help.
Yes.
Again, my name is Andy Stoll, and Harold, it's great to see you virtually. We just saw each other in Indianapolis in the US at the Global Entrepreneurship Congress, which was a lot of fun. I've been doing ecosystem building work for 23 years. Obviously, 23 years ago, we did not call it ecosystem building work, but at the heart of it is about creating communities or networks that are more supportive of entrepreneurs, people with ideas. I spent about 8 years doing that type of work in the US, in the middle of the US, in a state called Iowa. And then I started doing work nationally. And as Harold mentioned, I joined the Kaufman Foundation about 8 years ago and spent almost a decade working through the Kaufman Foundation to support the practice of entrepreneurial ecosystem building in the United States. I can talk a little bit more about that probably in the Q&A, but I want to start first by telling a bit of a story about how I got into this work. What I'm going to do, because I thought the presentation from Thomas and Harold was great, I'm going to step back a little bit and look at the big picture of how we think about it in the United States as it relates to what is ecosystem building and why now. So 2006, I graduated from university and I was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and excited to begin my career. Had a really strong desire to help and build communities where I lived, but I realized that I had a problem, which is I wanted to help communities, but I'd only really seen the community in which I grew up in the United States. So everyone was telling me I was supposed to get a job, which also seemed like a terrible idea. And so I looked all the ways that you could travel when you're 23 years old, sort of a gap year experience. And so I saved up money. I got a really normal adult job working in IT, and I saved up money. And I gave myself a goal of 3 years. And at the end of 3 years, I quit my job. I took all the money I had saved, and I bought a one-way ticket from the United States to China, and I left. And the goal was to go around the world for a year and see how people were building communities in all parts of the world. Unfortunately, I did not make it to Hungary, so hopefully we can fix that in the future here. But I did work, travel, volunteer, and explored much of the world, or many countries in the world, The goal was to go around the world for a year, and I ended up coming back 4 years later. So I lived, I worked, I traveled in 40 different countries all over the world. And there were four patterns that I saw in these 40 countries, and this was between the year 2006 and 2010. And these patterns are showing up even more and more, and I think they're very important for us to think about as we think about startup ecosystems. And these four patterns really help inform my work today. So the first pattern, actually, let me say this. Sorry. The trip was from 2006 to 2010, and in the middle of that was 2008, which, for those of you who are old enough, remember that was a very interesting time globally as the recession that started, I think, in the United States rippled throughout the world economy. There was also a lot of really interesting things that happened in 2008. The iPhone was introduced, for example, in 2008. The 2008, I think, as we look back on it, will end up being a really important year in the history of humankind. Now we're talking the history of humankind, which is decades or centuries or thousands of years. And so maybe it's 2008 plus or minus 20 years. And what I think we'll look back on this period, for those of us who live through it, is that 2008 and this period that we're in right now will really mark a big shift in how the world works. And as I traveled around the world through 40 countries over that 4-year period, right in the middle was 2008 of my trip. And what I think is happening, really, we're in the middle of, is that the industrial age has ended. So the industrial age, it was a period of mass migration from rural areas or regional areas or agricultural lands to bigger cities. It was the period that I think officially started in Western Europe, but really brought us machines, steam engine, the printing press, all of these things that really revolutionized the way humanity and humans lived in the world. This period, I believe, has actually come to an end, and we're now transitioning into a new period in human history. I'm not the only one who says this. There are numerous books. People called all sorts of names: the Fourth Industrial Revolution, the Global Age, the Networked Age. There's lots of different words for it, and depending on whose book you read, I like to call it the Connected Age. I think it helps capture what is driving this change, which is the exponential increase in technology and sort of the speed of technology and connectivity. The perfect example is this presentation, which 10 years ago would have been a very difficult conversation to have, probably on Skype or something, and how fast technology and connectivity is really driving the changing nature of our world. So in this connected age, there are four patterns that I want to talk about that I think are really relevant to startup ecosystems and building, and how we build them in places like the United States, like Hungary, like Chile. The first pattern that I saw traveling around the world for 4 years, through almost 40 countries, is that entrepreneurship and innovation has been democratized. And what I mean by that is that the barriers to entry to becoming an entrepreneur have collapsed. If you work in entrepreneurship or work with entrepreneurs, you know this. The tools, the resources, the access to knowledge through the internet, through AI, has made it a lot easier to start and to begin if you have an entrepreneurial idea. Now, it's not necessarily much easier to build and scale companies. It's very challenging, but the beginning part, the barriers to entry, have just collapsed. And this is really regardless of where you are, as long as you have access to the internet. The second pattern that I saw over 4 years through 40 different countries is this notion that the individual has been globalized. And so what I mean by that, let me explain a little bit, is that in the industrial age, companies were globalized. And what that meant was a company anywhere, regardless of where they were at, could access resources anywhere in the world, organize them into a company, and then make a product or a service and distribute that almost anywhere in the world. Well, in the connected age, this right has been afforded to nearly every individual. The third pattern I saw, again, traveling through these 40 countries over 4 years, is what I call networks are replacing hierarchies. And what I mean by that is hierarchies, the structures of sort of kings and corporations, where the person at the top is the boss and a group of people report to that person, and down the triangle. is the strongest form of organization that was used in much of the industrial age. It's how large corporations were formed. It's often how governments are formed. It's even how local organizations and communities. But with all this connectivity, this technology, networks have been able to replace hierarchies. Some of the largest movements in our world in the last 15 years, whether we're talking about Facebook or the Arab Spring, were organized as networks, not hierarchies. So the final pattern, and this is the key one, is that I always call it geography doesn't have a monopoly on good idea. So for those of you, maybe English is not your first language, let me translate. What I mean by that is not all the smart people live in Silicon Valley or Berlin or London. Smart people with good ideas live everywhere in the world, but places like Silicon Valley or Austin, Texas, or London have intentionally built systems to support entrepreneurs and people with those good ideas to get them the resources that they need to turn their ideas into reality. So with those 4 ideas in mind, the general core idea of the work we do in the United States, and I think really the core idea between startup ecosystem building work, which DEEP Ecosystems has been doing around the world, is that the communities that will thrive in this new connected age are really those that best help all people make ideas happen. And as was shared, these ideas happen within these ecosystems. And these ideas are created by entrepreneurs. So I used to work at the Kauffman Foundation, global research organizations fund research around the world around entrepreneurship. I want to take about a minute or two to share a little bit about what that research says, and then I'll bring it back to where we're at here and wrap up my remarks. So at the Kauffman Foundation, we always call the entrepreneurs the makers, the doers, and the dreamers. And 30 years of research, probably $1 billion of US dollars of research funded, basically says that entrepreneurship has a ton of value, not just to the individuals who start companies, but the communities in which they live and work and build those companies. It has impacts on standards of living, the quality of a community. It creates jobs, wealth, local restaurants, I mean, all of the things. And then in particular, startups, those high growth companies that we're talking about in this program, are actually the source of almost all net new jobs in economies, because those high growth companies quickly create new and often well-paying jobs. So if you're interested in any of that impact, helping entrepreneurs, the makers and the doers and the dreamers is important. But also what the research shows is that our traditional ways of helping entrepreneurship aren't necessarily producing the desired results. If you look at the growth of entrepreneurship across countries or even across regions of the United States, it's not all up and to the right, even though it's become easier to become an entrepreneur. But not all of the resources or the ecosystems are built equal. All communities have an ecosystem, but many of them are not so organized. And I think part of the effort of this program is to think about the regions of Hungary and how we can better organize those ecosystems. So as we think about entrepreneurship support, the traditional ways of helping entrepreneurs aren't necessarily working in all places. And so what we believe in the work I do in the United States is that new approaches are needed to build upon the traditional ways that we've helped entrepreneurs. So we believe that entrepreneurial ecosystem building is really a new and central approach for economic development in this new era. So really briefly, for those of you who are new, and then I will wrap up my talk here, is what is ecosystem building? Now, I'm very excited to hear a little bit more about DEEP Ecosystems definition of this, but here's the story I like to tell to explain to people who maybe this concept is new and to differentiate from what we've done in the past. So this is Angela. Angela is an entrepreneur. She has a great idea for a business. The good news for Angela is in her community, her startup idea has a lot of potential because there's people all over her town that have the knowledge, the resources, and want to help her build her startup idea into a company. Now, Angela's job is very straightforward, but it's a little complex, which is she's got to run around in the right order as quickly as possible to all the people that have resources and knowledge that can help her build her idea. So for people like us on this Teams call who want to help her, our job is actually also pretty simple, but it's straightforward, but a little complex, which is that Angela, before Angela shows up, we need to take all of the resources that could potentially help her and connect them together and a collaborative network of people before she shows up, so that when Angela does show up, she can quickly find the resources she needs to grow and scale her company. And so this notion of how we build these networks is what I would call ecosystem building. And people ask, well, how do you connect all of those groups together? And there's a surprising answer, and the answer, which is I think proven out in my 23 years of work, is actually culture. So the culture is the glue that binds together all of these different parts, and the interventions that you'll be doing through the DEEP Ecosystem Acceleration Program are helping to create and foster that culture, which leads to connections amongst these players. And so in the work that I do, we deeply believe that culture is a primary driver of economic development in this connected age, but it's not any culture. It's an entrepreneurial culture that encourages people to dream, to invite other people in, to help each other, to trust, to collaborate, to find ways to help your friends while your friends help you, to experiment, to take risks. And as was said earlier, Startup Chile is a good example of a group that intentionally went in at the start to use these ecosystem interventions to build that culture and propagate that culture across within communities and really across the country. So this ecosystem building these cultures, building this connectivity, these networks, kind of looks like this. Traditionally, we've always said in helping entrepreneurs, everything on the left. We need more money, technology, training, incubators, better policy. That's all true. But in ecosystem building, we look at everything on the right as well. How do we build more community, more social capital, more connectivity? How do we make sure everyone is able to participate in the startup ecosystem? And how do we create that collaborative culture of peer learning amongst entrepreneurs and startup founders within that community? All of this doesn't happen by accident. We need human beings. These human beings we call ecosystem builders, which are people who look at the whole system, the entire community, and realize that their community has many parts. But we need to find ways to step up, consider that whole system and how we get that entire system, all those elements, the incubators, the accelerators, the banks, the libraries, the government, the school systems to work together to support those entrepreneurs. So ecosystem building and ecosystem builders create really this invisible infrastructure, these networks and this culture. It's not necessarily just big buildings or big pools of investment money, but it's how do we build networks so that human beings can collaborate with each other to build their ventures. So the last thing I'll leave you with is the key idea of what I'm saying is that ecosystems building is about moving communities from disconnected and connected. And if I've learned one thing in 23 years, it's that ecosystem builders have many backgrounds. So you all probably come from different places and different spaces within your communities. And it requires all of those people, and that not one individual or one organization can build an entrepreneurial ecosystem by themselves. So you've got to work together. And that's why we're here in this program, to meet and connect and figure out how we can all work together. So again, my name is Andy Stoll. I'm the executive director of the eShip Alliance, which is a network in the United States working to advance entrepreneurial ecosystem building as a widely recognized professional practice. And we help, similar to the work that DEEP does in the United States, help community and community leaders like you build and strengthen their entrepreneurial ecosystem regardless of where they're at. So thank you so much for the time, and I look forward to hearing some questions and learning more of the rest of this presentation.
Great. Thank you very much, Andy, for this great presentation. Yeah, like you said, please, everyone, if you have questions, please post them in the chat. There's a Q&A section. Or also later on, after the next presentation, we will open the mic so you can also have a direct interaction. Having said that, I would like to now invite our next speaker. Let me quickly introduce to you Mayer Caro from Chile. He is ecosystem lead at EcoSD and SENSE. So EcoSD, that's Spanish for Ecosystem for Digital Health Innovation, led by one organization called SENSE, that is like the orchestrator of this new ecosystem. Mayer is also an alumni of our global DEEPSEA program. So around 1.5, 2 years ago, much of this started out with an idea how to connect various stakeholders in the health scene in Chile, how to support innovation and empower innovators in the ecosystem. And yeah, today he will share a few words about best practices and how he has achieved this, or where we are standing at the moment. I'm also very happy to see him again. We just were there 2-3 weeks ago, I think, at a major national or international conference in Santiago de Chile, bringing various stakeholders together, including the Minister of Health and companies like Pfizer or Roche, all of them, coming together to see what can be done to promote Chile's path towards innovation in health. Now, having said that, I would like to hand over to you, Mayer. Do you have a presentation to share?
Yeah, sure. Let me share it very quick.
Sure.
Okay, now it shows okay?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Sorry, so first of all, real quick, I want to thank you for inviting me. As Harald said, I'm Mayer Caro, and I'm the current ecosystem lead at SENS, which is the National Center for Health Information Systems in Chile, a nonprofit organization that leads the digital transformation for the health sector in Chile, but also in Latin America. And to achieve this goal, we work closely with the government, but also with international organizations such as the World Health Organization, the Inter-American Development Bank, but also with universities, startups, corporate, and patient associations. And we've been around since 2018, I believe. So for those who don't know, Chile is this long 20 million people country in South America, right in the South Cone, looking to the Pacific Ocean. That is known mainly for being the world's top copper producer. It's award-winning wines. It's natural beauties. This is Torres del Paine in Patagonia. And it's Moais in Easter Island. But when it comes to innovation, unfortunately, Chile has prioritized spending in other areas, such as healthcare, for instance. And research and development spending has been around the same for the last decades or so, and at around 0.39% of the GDP, way below the average of 2.7% in the OECD. And on the other hand, we're also culturally very conservative and very risk-averse people. So as a result, private spending in research and development in Chile, it's only around 40%, which is way lower than the 74% average in developed countries. So this lack of stronger policies has led Chile in the recent years to drop places from the World Intellectual Property Organization Global Innovation Index. And between 2016 and 2023, it's fallen from the 44th place to the 52nd place and losing its Latin American leadership position to Brazil. This is very sad and all, but Chile is still an innovation leader in South America. And while there's not that much money directly available to support innovation, Chile has developed its share of initiatives I want to share with you to promote innovation and entrepreneurship. The first of all, and I believe the most important one, it's the role of the Production Development Corporation called Corfo in Chile, which is the government agency that's responsible for supporting entrepreneurship, innovation, competitiveness in the country, as well as for strengthening human capital and technological capacities. Corfo also supports sectoral innovation through Technological Centers for Innovation program. This is the program that enabled SENS to be born and aims to create specialized infrastructure, equipment, expert human capital to serve startups, small medium enterprises, and entrepreneurs in developing high-value products and services. And it was Corfo as well, as the institution that started Startup Chile. I won't talk long about it because Thomas already made a very good point about how Startup Chile has been a very valuable initiative to position Chile as a launchpad for startups who want to land in Latin America. But then we have other Corfo-led programs such as Corfo Transforma, which are a lot more long-term sector-specific and public-private initiatives that are designed to sophisticate and diversify Chile's productive matrix. It's aimed to driving sustainable high-quality growth, and each program identifies a prioritized economic sector developing a strategic roadmap to close competitiveness and technology gaps in such sector, and then establishes a multi-actor governance model that brings together the government, industry, the academia, and civil society in a decentralized and regionally anchored network of stakeholders, pretty much like a thematic ecosystem, right? So this aims to foster innovation and entrepreneurship through coordinated calls, capacity building around this sector, and of course, shared investment. And since 2016, Corfo has implemented several of these Transforma initiatives in the tourism, food industry, and construction sectors. And earlier this year, it unveiled the strategic roadmap for the health industry. Chile has also passed quite a few laws aimed at fostering innovation, and the last of which amends the public procurement law to enable procurement specifically for innovative solutions. This law drives innovation by creating a demand pool from the public sector and fosters the co-creation of solutions to public challenges through a multi-stage approach where several projects compete to solve an open innovation challenge that's proposed by a public institution, and where financing is available at every stage to support the development and piloting of such solutions, and where only a single winning solution is then ultimately acquired. And this, of course, enables public-private collaboration, but also guarantees or gives a certain degree of certainty about the product market fit via this co-creation process. Then I want to talk a little bit about EcoSD, which is the digital health innovation ecosystem that is fostered by SENS and currently holds 15 member organizations that include corporate startups, universities, public and private hospitals, patient associations, and public health services in Chile. We tried or we aim to innovate with purpose. We foster collaboration to advance into a more agile health system, one that's capable of effectively addressing current and future challenges through innovation and digital transformation of the healthcare sector. And we do this by addressing identified barriers for innovation in this sector, by community building and capacity building, by identifying and promoting scalable best practices, and of course, engaging in innovation co-creation. We've identified several gaps or barriers for innovation, but also a huge growing potential for the health tech industry. This is a work we've done within the ecosystem, and while regulatory gaps remain for a certain group of medical devices, there have been recent advances both in digital health regulation and data privacy law, including an enactment of a GDPR equivalent act. That is very encouraging, as this will allow for a more homogeneous digital ecosystem, enabling new solutions to be more readily adopted and scaled. At EcoSD and at SENS, we're tackling many of these remaining barriers and trying to harness Chile's potential to become Latin America's health innovation powerhouse. We already lead the region in research and clinical trials. We boast one of the world's most advanced internet infrastructures, ranked first in the Latin America AI Index, and also are among the few nations with an enacted national AI policy. We're currently addressing several of these identified barriers. For instance, we address this disconnection between demand and offer by promoting open innovation challenges from health providers and guiding them through with the help of the ecosystem. We also install innovation capabilities within health providers to make it easier for them to adopt new technology and pilot new solutions, and engage in ecosystem articulation by identifying relevant common challenges to drive consortia and also by community building, and address cultural aspects by constantly promoting openness, collaboration, and trust within the community we're currently building. We also address some normative deficiencies through the creation of public goods and supporting the Ministry of Health in creating new regulations. For instance, we're very close to launching our first digital health technology evaluation manual. And when it comes to what we've done with EcoSD, of course, we began crafting an engaging value proposition through the DeepSea program, and then developed a custom proposition for each identified actor, showing how they could capture value by participating in EcoSD. If I mentioned earlier that we are culturally risk averse, this doubles for the health sector. And I have to say the network was not very mature when we began working with the ecosystem concept. So to further promote stakeholder maturity and ecosystem ownership, we try to meet everyone where they're at and invited them to a co-creation process to build this shared vision around our value proposition. Trying to take advantage on the momentum that the co-creation process managed to build, we engaged in community building through open virtual meetups that have helped participants discover different opportunities for collaboration, exchange ideas, and have been very valuable in helping them learn from one another. We're also dedicating significant efforts to uncover each actor's wants and needs. This is a task that hinges on first establishing trust, which is not as easy as it sounds. Not everyone is willing to readily tell you what they need from you or from the ecosystem. And we try to gather this information and actively try to create value for our members, but also for the innovation network. Finally, we have recognized the importance of celebrating and broadcasting our small victories, mainly to attract new members and continually strengthen the ecosystem. And we are now on a continuous dialogue with our members in order to create better value and, of course, make EcoSD grow. Our focus for this first stage, we have not been around for long, is building on our shared vision. And for this, we've held, as Harald already told you, 3-day events with nearly 600 attendees that brought together all the relevant stakeholders to discover opportunities and accelerate the growth of the ecosystem. And while our work has just begun, we have already building a thriving community. We have already, through this event, positioned collaboration as a vital enabler for digital health transformation in the sector, and have begun building capabilities for innovation, adoption of technologies, both at a technical and decision-making levels, and also linking demand and offer via open innovation challenges that have been funded by the ecosystem. By the way, that's Harald right there. We had him come to the event to mainly help us install this ecosystem thinking in our community during the event. As I told you, we are working heavily in changing how the actors in EcoSD think about how they relate with other institutions within the ecosystem. So thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions as well.
Thank you, Mayur. Can you please read out the last slides?
Köszönöm.
Who can help us with that?
Thank you.
Yeah. Good, thanks. Yeah, a round of applause for Mayur and Andy also. I would now like to open the floor for questions. Yeah, so if you want to ask something or quickly present yourself and connect, now is a good time. You can just unmute yourself, raise your hand, activate your camera, briefly present yourself. Now there's one question that was posted in the Q&A section towards Andy from Bertalan. It's about industry collaborations. The question is, are large corporations members of organizations? How to link startups to large corporations, large corporates, and whether they issue open calls for startups. Yeah, so the role of corporates in the ecosystem. To Andy, please.
Thanks a lot.
Sure. What I would say is yes is the short answer. I think there could be an entire session just talking about all the different ways that corporations can engage. I think there is one challenge, major challenge, and one opportunity that I see a lot and very often, particularly in the United States context. The big challenge is that corporations don't think about startups very often. and they often don't even realize there are startups in their community that could help them because they think of them as tiny little companies. And so getting corporate leaders to even understand that there are startups, and then recognizing that the corporation's investment in those startups or helping them will help the corporation grow potentially. What we have seen in the work I've done in the US in a couple different places is corporations do make excellent first customers for startups, but you have to get the CEOs and their executives to understand that, because oftentimes startups need a large test pilot program, and for corporations, they have usually many opportunities for that. And so there is a whole conversation we can have, but I don't think we have time right now. But the corporations are an important part, especially the large ones, in engaging in an ecosystem if you can get them to realize they're in that ecosystem.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks a lot.
Vedalan, is that answering your question?
Yeah.
Maybe,
just
sorry,
a comment
just to interrupt.
that,
Quickly present who you are
yeah.
and what organization you represent, or if you are representing.
Yeah, just we are in the healthcare space. We are a private research institute, and we are part of the EIT community. And just an observation on that is that in Europe, at least what we see is that certain large pharmaceutical companies have realized exactly that trend that they don't necessarily saw in the past. The role of these small companies, small startups, as a good source for new innovation. And recently we started to see what we call open calls by these large pharmaceutical companies, which are in a given therapeutical area, they launch their interest for a potential innovation, and then through that they provide opportunity for startup to present their case, and then they choose. Hopefully they choose eventually some of them to exactly that, what you just said, provide not necessarily, they don't necessarily buy them, but provide them monetization, some kind of a revenue deal if they see that innovation sort of flying. So I was just wondering if you have similar experiences in the US. Of course, it's a much more mature market in many, many ways.
I think the short answer is yes. Also, what corporations have found in the work I've done is they'll start knowing the startup by being a pilot customer, and they'll build relationships. They'll learn more about the technology, or in your case, the medical innovation. And then they end up sort of buying them later, but they've almost tested out the startup and the team. And then in many cases for the startup, it allows them access to customers or a scale they couldn't even imagine. But again, it's like getting the corporations to even realize, first of all, that they're there. But then how do you act? Like, is there a special team that does contracts with those smaller companies? Because they obviously need to be different than if they're government contracts, and also making sure they don't crush the startup in the process.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thanks.
Sorry, just to move on a little bit. We have two people in the waiting line for questions, and I think time-wise, that's about it. 3 questions, so please make it quick. First, I would like to hand over to Laszlo Korani. If you could quickly unmute yourself, present yourself, please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, or I don't know for others where they are located. Anyhow, there were 2 interesting points in Meyer's presentation that are very much in parallel with what we have initiated at government or policy level. And these
You unmuted yourself.
Sorry about that. We're just gone for a second.
So
please go.
Two interesting ideas that I would like to follow up with Meyer, maybe an email. Both are very close. What we are now doing, started to do it at policy level. One is the innovation procurement, and the other one is the digital health hub. So both are very much in connection with the programs that we we have just launched recently. So I don't want to elaborate that because we have limited time, but I will write to Meyer about it.
Great. Yeah, that's also the idea here. Please feel free to connect, share your contact details in the chat. If you want to talk to a certain presenter or participant here, also please feel free to ask us directly. We're happy to make introductions.
I will. I will ask you how we should do it. It's not a secret or private issue. Just it was very good to hear
Absolutely.
from Meyer. Thank you.
Thanks, Laszlo. Now, 2 more questions from Andreas, and then handing over to Alexander. Andreas, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm Andreas from Academy of Entrepreneurship in Greece. I would like to emphasize the importance for the ecosystem acceleration of the public sector, because coming from Greece, it is the first country globally on the complexity of business environment. I agree with Andy that we have brilliant startups all over the world, but the environment that they grow up is extremely important. And that's why we try to train public employees of Europe with an entrepreneurial mindset and putting the sustainable goals in their mindset. So that I think these 2 sectors are very, very important if we want to accelerate ecosystem. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay. I think there was not a question so much, right?
You're right.
Thank you. No, also Andreas, happy to see you here. Also a DEEP member from Greece, Academy of Entrepreneurship. Great also to see this international connection. That's also the idea of why we're here today. So last question, please, yeah. Alexander.
Yeah, it's Alexander from Serbia, and I'm also in the health tech space, which seems like we have a really strong healthcare community here, and I'm curious, maybe to hear your comment. This is something that I've seen sort of the cycle of this open innovation from the corporation, and I want to get back to the topic of working with corporations. For instance, like Pfizer grant for apps, it's been for a while now. It seems like there is no more, and it's going up and down. Have you seen this sort of downtrend in terms of the openness for corporate collaboration, and how do you view the future trend?
That's a good question. I think this is something we can analyze probably around the world. Are corporates receding? I think from my experience, if I may also answer, I think like these classical, standard accelerator programs where you say, I'm sponsoring a program, we're doing a cohort, it's structured, it repeats again and again and again. I think these a little bit old school traditional programs from corporates, I see them a little bit disappearing or changing, evolving. But maybe also Meyer, you worked with corporates, or maybe also Thomas, if you have some more thoughts on that. That's an interesting question, I think.
Yeah, what I can say about that is that in Chile, there's corporate venture capital initiative that involves other sectors other than healthcare. Corporates here, especially in the healthcare sector, have been more conservative, but that said, they have acknowledged the importance of advancing in this ecosystem building initiative, and they're willing to invest into the ecosystem, but not necessarily into startups at this point. I think it's also a maturity thing, and probably once they see more valuable opportunities of working with the current startups that are involved within the ecosystem, they will do so.
It's very interesting that you. Oh yeah, sorry, Andy, go ahead.
I'm just going to give you one 20-second example of where I think corporate, at least in the U.S. context. So the Ford Motor Company, the car company, well, I don't even know if they're just a car company anymore, but just invested $1 billion with a B in Detroit, Michigan, to build a mobility campus, because Ford realizes the future of cars is probably not cars. It's probably a combination of a lot of transport. And so they're building this giant innovation hub, because it's not just a nice thing for startups, it's the entire future of an industry that they're trying to guide a whole ecosystem to take them to and transform their company. So I'll put a link in the chat.
Awesome.
There, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I might
Good.
add the
Thomas,
the
please
thought.
go ahead.
Yeah, just a thought quickly. So first of all, it's very interesting, Andy, what you're sharing. I mean, the automotive sector really needs to start to find their future. So having like an approach investing into an ecosystem hub, like you just mentioned, makes a lot of sense. And I expect this to happen in Europe as well. I mean, in a way, Unternehmertum is funded by the year of BMW. It's one of the examples. So probably if you're in that sector and you're building an ecosystem hub, you might be one of the lucky ones that gets bigger funding in the future. Yes, but in principle, I found it interesting what Mair said, that in Chile you have the corporates investing now in, let's say, the broader network and ecosystem, but not in the startups, while in Europe you have a bit the opposite. So you see a concentration or professionalization moving up the value chain in the innovation cycle, where the corporates now say we only work directly with startups, and we kind of we cannot afford, they say, to put money into the broader event networking programming kind of space, which I find a bit difficult, but I understand where this is coming from. And what is now the trend? Corporate venture clienting was for a long time the big trend. And then again, BMW, the BMW Startup Garage was a leader in saying that CVC doesn't work well, and has invented the so-called venture clienting model. And the venture clienting model is, that's a huge hype now. So a lot of corporates are adopting this. The venture clienting model is based on rapid adoption of pilots with startups. About 100 pilots per year is often the goal, and it means that the goal is not an investment by the corporate into the startup, but the goal is a procurement contract. So the corporates are designing these programs where they take in about 100 startup pilots, and out of this they want to procure 1 or 2 bigger contracts for startups after successful pilots. That I would say is the current trend. And all the big companies have set up these kind of venture clienting models.
Very good. This was a discussion I think that can go on. It's very interesting to see. And also, I think for all ecosystem builders on the ground, very important to consider how to create value and how to involve these the logic of corporate innovation into their offerings or into their setup of the ecosystems. Now, wrapping up our webinar for today, I would just like to highlight that this webinar is part of a bigger project, right? DEEPSEA Hungary. It's our DEEP Startup Ecosystem Accelerator for Hungary, is going until 2027. And as the next step, we will have on the 1st of July, 2 weeks from now, in Budapest, an in-person one-day workshop, what we call Ecosystem Hack. We are inviting stakeholders and maybe also innovators that have an idea for how to grow the ecosystem to meet and to join us. This will take place 1st of July, around 30 to 50 people. And here we will, insert the logic of a pre-accelerator, highlight and explore together what's important in terms of innovation, in terms of ecosystem building. We will develop together ideas, identify maybe gaps or opportunities in the ecosystem, and ideally inspire participants or network members of the people that are there to come up with concrete project ideas and then apply to join our DEEPSEA program. You can find all the information and register to sign up at deepecosystems.com/DEEPSEA Hungary. We will also share this here in the chat. And DEEPSEA Hungary, like I said, that's a 2-year program. We will select around 8 projects, what we call moonshot projects, right? So big vision, big mission, big ambition. We will work with them intensely over the course of 2 years, starting with an accelerator program that will take place in a hybrid form, online trainings, online mentoring, plus an in-person bootcamp later the year. Work with you over the course of 2 years as part of our global community. With this, coming to the end, Again, please visit deepecosystems.com/DeepSea Hungary to find out more information and to register. Feel free to contact me directly if you have an idea or a question. The idea is also that this start up a conversation. So I saw several people sharing also in the chat their contact information. Make use of that, connect and learn together. And with that, I would like to thank everyone here for this time. It was a super inspiring webinar, and I look forward to working with you in the future, seeing you again very soon. So thanks for my part, and goodbye.